All right, we are rolling. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Everyone takes a break for a few minutes from this. From this busy time of year to learn some Torah. Okay, so we're actually well into this section that relates to Hatmana, the Siman Ration and Zion. Sif. We're going to begin today with Sif Zion. We finished last week Sif Vav, which talked about that you are allowed to do Hatmana on Shabbos in a davar she'ena mosif hevel, something that does not have increasing heat. If it's not for the purposes of Hatmana, but it's more you want to protect. Sorry, this was not that one. That was hay actually. Was. Sorry, I went back even too far. Vav had said it was a mutter to do it in a davar mutter lahatn v'shavas davar tzonim b'davar she'en mosihel kadesh layitztan yod beyosef, so it doesn't get more cold. Or kadesh tafig tzinaso, or you want to take the chill out of the food, so you wrap it in a down blanket or something like that. But if it's a davar hamosif hevel, then even if it's completely cold, what you're putting in there, that's not going to be acceptable. That was just a review from last week.
Yes, that's assuming that you had the Hatmana before Shabbat.
So this is This is saying it's mutter lahatmin b'Shabbat, right? It's this is an exception because it's cold food. All you're trying to do, it's not going to get hot because nothing is heating up here. All you're trying to do is remove the chill, or you're trying to keep it from getting colder. But it's already basically room temperature. You just don't want it to, remember they didn't have heating systems in their houses. So, they didn't want it to get so cold if it was a really cold.
But if it's not so, then
you can't. Right, exactly. That's before Shabbat. Exactly. Now, Sif Zion begins and says the following. And you gotta love it when, by the way, it's written in Aramaic. I mean, this is clearly a quotation of, it's clearly not the words of the Shulchan Aruch. He wrote mostly in Hebrew. I mean, he understood Aramaic, obviously, but take a look at this. But this is in the explanation of the Mishnah on Mem Zayin in Shabbos. Kol heichad asrina hatmana. Any place, a situation where we forbade the hatmana that we've talked about for a number of weeks now. Afilu. Cold sarcas. That includes all the times, like we've said, it's not allowed. That also includes when the food, it's in the pot here, and it's in question, is fully cooked. Cold sarka, cold sarka. Asriyan, that is not allowed. That is prohibited. The afilu, and even when is it also not allowed? Afilu means stomach viralo, even if it's fully cooked, and the continuation of the cooking process. Yeah, it's fully cooked, but the continuation of the cooking of this item, of this food, is actually not good for it. It dries out. It's stomach as it dries out. By the way, think of the word like tzimukim. What are tzimukim? Raised, right? It's like it's dry as it dries out. It's not good for it. Again, think of if you are you're reheating grilled chicken. We all know. We've all done it by accident. You reheat it too much, and suddenly it tastes like rubber. Right, so it's not like it's good. Oh, I'm doing this hatmana. It's beneficial. No, even so, you're still not allowed to do you're not allowed to do that hatmana. Okay, so let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah's comments, Lamed Gimel and Lamed Daled. Cold sarka, velo dami l'shehiyah al gabe kira l'chule alma mutar b'mevushal cold sarka. This is not like shehiyah, which we gave a full treatment of, as he says, siman ration and gimel, just like we learned in the ration and gimel. This is not like shehiyah where it's on top of the oven the kira, the ancient oven, where everyone says it's permissible if it's fully cooked. Right, you're allowed to do shehiyah going into Shabbos with a fully cooked dish, according to the Ramah, which is what we paskin like, even if it's a half or a third cooked, kemachal ben drusai. But for the Shulchan Aruch, he seems to have taken the position fully cooked is necessary. The stam hatmana ikorohu litzorech machar. Because the average situation in which you do hatmana, the average person, not everyone's going to follow so it's an average. Not everyone falls in the category of average in terms of their action. But most people, when they do hatmana for tomorrow. Why? You're putting it in something, or you're enveloping it. I want it to stay there, be hot till tomorrow for Shabbos lunch. And that would be like using even a heat source, right? The idea of doing hatmana, if I was doing hatmana from Tuesday to Wednesday, is I want to eat it on Wednesday, and it needs. I want to keep it hot. It needs extra time to cook, and this will cook it faster. It'll cook it better. Whatever the situation is, stam hatmana ikarohu l'tzarech machar. It's for tomorrow, for Shabbos day. So what's the whole fear? Well, the whole thing, though, underlying this whole thing is that I might stoke the coals in order that the food that's in the hatmana situation does not cool down by the time we get to tomorrow. This is my fear. Ulakach, and it's cooked. And the idea is it's cooked, it's ready, but I want it tomorrow, so I don't want it to cool down. I don't, and they didn't have this fancy, contraptions we have today to reheat food. So therefore, in all scenarios, we are concerned that people will stoke the coals, whether or not, no matter what the heat source is. Right? If you put it in hot ashes, okay, do hatmana in hot ashes, the gazru, right? So if you put it into remetz, into this hot ashes, we're worried you're going to start playing around with it in order to keep the heat up. The gazru, and so the rabbis decreed bishum zeh, because of this scenario, that you might do hatmana in remetz, in hot ashes. Mishum zeh b'chol davar hamosif hevel. All the other dvarim hamosifim hevel, all other heat sources became decreed against as well. You say, how can I stoke a pile of olive scraps? I can't stoke a pile of olive scraps. First of all, what's the problem? I'm moving olive scraps around. There's no flame. That it has this natural process that it decomposes and therefore there's heat involved in it. Which again, as I told you, if you everyone is what's that pile called? Composting. Composting is not a fire. It's not. You can't say this is a violation of Havara. It's not.
The way it is, because the bottom layer will still be hot and the top layer will cool off because it's exposed to the air. So when you turn it around, you're essentially stoking coals.
No doubt, but there's no fire, right? So in terms of the violation of creating a fire on Shabbos, it's not a fire, right? So there's no Havara here, right? The ashes, there's embers there, there's coals, there's flames. You're right. Undoubtedly, what you're saying from a scientific perspective is correct. That if I move the olive scraps around, yes, you're right. The ones at the bottom are hotter than the ones at the top. So therefore, Jason will get that one. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So therefore, all situations of hatmana in a davar hamosif, even the olive scraps, for example, became decreed against because you might stoke the coals. Even though, again, olives are not coals, okay? And even if you're doing hatmana for Friday night, I just want to keep it hot from before Shabbos, an hour after Shabbos starts, so I can serve it to my guests and it's the right temperature. It's like we're not going to stoke the coals for it's fully cooked. I just want to keep it in for 1 hour until the meal starts when everyone gets home from shul. The rabbis made no differentiations. The rule is the rule. It's on the books. It's a law. We never made exception cases. That's it. Again, in many ways, that's how law works. Not just Jewish law. Sometimes laws work like that in secular society. There's a law. You're like, that doesn't make sense in this context. Okay, but that's the law. So that's how the rabbis made this law. Masha ain't kain b'shiyah. Not so by shehiyah. Right? When you put it, It's not a Hatmana situation. It's just on a heat source from before Shabbos. It's fully cooked or at least half cooked. The stam shehiyah hu rak litzarech halayla. Why do people do shehiyah? Most people do shehiyah for the evening meal, for the Friday night meal. So you're not going to play with it so much. It'll either be cooked, or if it's fully cooked, or if you cover the knobs and the dials, etc., etc. Sheharei manicha megula velo yiskar bizman muad. We actually leave it open. We don't cover it over like in a hatmana situation, or we wrap it up. And it's not going to get so cold in a small amount of time. We're not worried about that. So we're not worried in that situation. People are going to stoke the coals unless it's not fully cooked or it's not half cooked and it's not covered. The knobs are not covered. The grufo kutuma. Then we're worried you're going to play with the coals because you need to cook it. But here, presumably, we're dealing with fully cooked or at least partially cooked in a way that you're not going to likely play with the coals. Okay, and that's what's underlying this.
But you're here for tomorrow is okay also, no?
Yes, you can, because again, the law is the law. You say, that makes sense that you might actually play with the coals Shabbos day if I do shehiyah, play with the heat source. Okay, but the rule is that they didn't prohibit that because they were worried about the normal case. The law was made in the normal case, and the law permits it. If you want to do shehiyah till the next day, okay, you can. Be careful not to do the thing that they were worried about, but it is okay. Okay. Lamed dalad vafilu mitztamik veralo uvediavad mutar lechule alma b'mitztamik veralo b'chanis kala b'sifal. What? Okay. So lechatchila, let's explain. Ideally, you're avoiding doing hatmana even if the food is fully cooked and it's mitztamik veralo. The continuation of it is. And
You're not destroying it.
Exactly, you're doing a disservice to this food. Even so, you're not supposed to do that. But after the fact, let's say you did it. Maybe it was by accident, by the way. It ended up being mitztame viralo. It was I did hatmana before Shabbos, and by the time Shabbos started, it went. There's a point where it's good, and then now you're going downhill. So then. Okay, you shouldn't have done it in the first place, but now that it's been done, can I eat the food or not? And the answer is yes. Everyone says you can eat the food. In a case of mitzamik viralo, because what you did was actually you ruined it. So you didn't benefit. Usually, when we say you can't do things on Shabbos because it was prohibited, it's because you're benefiting from the prohibition that was violated on Shabbos. Here, you're not benefiting from it. Here, you're suffering for the mistake that you made. So we allow it, as we talked about in Sifal. Okay, again, as ideal, l'chatchila, b'diavad, and after the fact, it's okay. Let's go on to the there. Let's go to the Ramah. The Ramah adds in two important words here. Where is that? So here. Okay. The Ramah says, "V'chein ikar." That this opinion that the Shulchan Aruch has just quoted is the essential opinion. This is the real one. This is the correct one. He's clearly taking sides here. As the Be'er Halacha says, "Shekein pasku kol haposkim." This is what everyone agrees. V'shitas hayesh mekilim, the opinion that's about to be quoted, the lenient opinion. He shita yichida. This is a singular outlier opinion. The opinion of the supermajority here is that the opinion we just talked about. But we have another opinion, and it makes its way into the Ramah, because you'll see in a moment, people follow this opinion. Minhag is very minhag drives situations often. If people, large swaths of Jews, large communities are doing this, so it's something that one has to justify in the way that Ashkenazi poskim classically did. So take a look, top line here of this page. Yesh mekilin. There were those that were more lenient. And they said, the whole shehu chai, if it's chai legamre, if it's completely raw. And we talked about raw being a unique category. O nisbash al kol tzarko, or it's fully cooked. Remember we said about raw, by shehiyah, So you do it with your cholent. If you turn your cholent on, you turn your crock pot on a few minutes before Shabbos, it's fine. Why? Because you're not going to play with it. You're going to leave it till tomorrow. I forget. It's out of my head. It's still. It'll be good by tomorrow. I'm not worried. Or if it's fully cooked, which I have less incentive to play with the coals if it's fully cooked. So mutter behatmana kemo b'shihui. So I'm allowed to do hatmana like I am able to do shihia in these situations. No problem. Commotion is bar le'elba simon Rishon and Gimel, as we talked about in Rishon and Gimel. So let's take a look at the Ramah for a second. V'yesh mikilim v'chulei lamed hey ka'e ahatmana. This is dealing with the case of hatmana. V'davar hamosif hevel miba ojom. In a situation where it's Friday afternoon and I do hatmana in a manner where the heat is increasing. Okay, whether it's the olive scraps or whether it's the coals, whether it's on top of the coals and it's wrapped in a blanket. We'll talk about that case in Sif Chet. Okay, afilu mevushal. Sorry, aval lahatmin b'Shabbos b'davar she'ena mosif hevel. If you do it on Shabbos, hatmana on Shabbos, according to this Mekil lenient opinion, even if it's a davar she'eno mosif hevel, doesn't add heat. Afilu mevushal kol tzorko, even if it's fully cooked, umitztamei v'ralo, and it's the continuation of the cooking is not good for this food. Also, even the Yesh Mekilim, the lenient opinion would agree. Hatmana on Shabbos, no, not okay. Even davar she'ena mosif hevel, with the exceptions that we talked about being allowed. But the general starting point is no. But before Shabbos, the lenient opinion says that's okay.
So where is the lenient opinion? Say in the beginning, it says hatmana b'davar mosif hevel bi'od. What does that mean?
That the case that is described by the Ramah is talking about hatmana and a davar hamosif hevel. He wants to clarify. He's not being lenient for a case of Eino Mosif Hevel.
Oh, okay.
Right? He's talking about Mosif Hevel. Otherwise, his opinion is not so interesting. If it's Eino Mosif Hevel, everyone agrees to that. So that's what's happening. Let's go to Lamed Vav Legamre, that it's completely raw. Svir lahu keven shuchai, because it's completely raw. Right, the meat is raw. Even if you do hatmana in the hot ashes, lo haya misbashel al yidei hachitu l'tzorach halayla. It will not cook by stoking the coals at night. Like playing with it doesn't help. And so since I don't have any incentive to play with it for tonight because it's not going to help for tonight, I'm going to leave it till the morning. By the time I wake up in the morning, the average situation is it'll be cooked already, and I won't play with it. Without stoking the coals in the morning, it'll be ready. And therefore, we are not concerned about, according to the lenient case, if you do hatmana in a davar hamosif hevel on erev Shabbos with meat that's raw. Okay. By the way, this would lend credence to the opinion, I told you, I've explained that there are some people who put little aluminum foil balls at the bottom of their crock pot. This lenient opinion would say that you don't need to do that, even if you consider that a hatmana situation where the top of the crock pot counts as the hatmana on top, as the covering on top of this enveloping situation. Even so, this lenient opinion would allow that. I don't put those little balls of aluminum foil at the bottom. That's okay. The top is just a cover, and therefore it's not a hatmana situation. But I'm just noting that would be allowed even if you held that would be allowed according to this lenient opinion. Okay. Let's go back in the Ramah for a moment just to finish off this seif. And in the places where they are lenient and they follow this opinion, ein limchos biyadam. Do not protest what they are doing, what's in their hands. Let them be. Let them follow their opinion. But if you're starting a new community, this is not your opinion for you. Follow the first opinion, the Ikar opinion. By the way, it's very important. It's very interesting, just from a historical perspective. This phrase "ein limchos b'yadam" does come up. I'm not the biggest lamdan. I've learned enough to see that this phrase comes up. This comes up sometimes. The Ramah, the idea about don't protest. Machia is a protest. Like I'm actually familiar in one place, he does say you should protest. Well, so it's not, sometimes he says it's worth going to battle, and sometimes it's not worth going to battle. The place where he says, by the way, that comes to mind, which was in the news when I was in Smicha. It was a big deal. It probably wasn't such a big hawk. You know, when you're in YU, certain things are in that moment seem like they're so big. When you're here, when I'm in here, like I have no idea what's going on in the base measures anymore. What's the hawk? At some point SAR had they allowed a girl to wear tefillin. Remember this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is like
When was that?
it was
No time.
long time ago. They made an exception. She came, I think, from a background of as conservative, whatever. And they said it's okay. In the women's minyan or whatever, the women's tefillah, you can. Oh, this blew up in Yeshiva University like wildfire. So what happened? So if you look at the Ramah in the Hilchot Tefillin, so there it talks about the Shulchan Aruch quotes the opinion that a tefillin is a mitzvah asesh as man grama. He says a woman's potter. If you read, by the way, very carefully, the Shulchan Aruch, potter is not, you can't do it. Potter means exempt. You don't have to do it. The Ramah is the one who goes the extra mile and says, and if they do wear the tefillin, yesh lo imchos, right? You should protest this. This is something we shouldn't allow. So I'm not commenting here on this issue, but I just recall that there are certain times when the Ramah does say yesh lo imchos, that we should speak up and say things and be upset about it and raise a stink. And sometimes he says, just if people have a different minhag, just let it be. Ein limchos biyadam. They have, they're relying on some opinion out there. So just let them be.
Interesting, he doesn't give you the source for
this lenient
yeah,
opinion. So I'm just looking
must
here.
have been a conservative.
Yeah. Right. Who's the Yeshorim who's plugging the yeah, 1 second here. Yeah, he doesn't even if you look at the Be'er Halacha, he doesn't
Right.
yeah.
But it's the same thing, like if someone has a fireplace at home, you cannot turn it on Shabbat before Shabbat and leave it going to Shabbat. For the same reason, you might play with the.
So we did a seminar. Were you here? Did you join the shir yet at that point? Okay, great. So there was a whole there was not such a long seminar. There's a seminar about a fire, not
Right.
for cooking purposes, but in your fireplace.
Right.
So the bottom line psak halacha is that if your fire before Shabbos is at a stage where it's strong enough, whatever this means, that you don't need to play with it. Obviously, at some point it's going to dissipate. But if it's at a place where you're not, or like, oh, the fire is like in a good place right now, I still don't have to add more coals to it. If it was in a situation as Shabbos is entering where like it's iffy, this fire is iffy, that I might need to add more coals or more wood, whatever, to get it to kind of really take hold, then I'm not allowed to. Then I should put it out before Shabbos starts. But if it's already, omed me'eleha, the flame is nice flame, you can have your fireplace on Friday night, and then it just burns out by itself. Okay. All right. By the way, if you look at the Be'er Halacha, I didn't notice this until a moment ago. In the middle of it, he said, "Kol Sarko." He said, "Ayin Tosefes Shabbos ma shekosav ezel asot masik gam hu bekavana nakat harama Kol Sarko." Okay, the Ramah is also talking about fully cooked, not just machal ben drusai. Lashvir de bepachos mizeh. If it was less than machal ben drusai, ach b'makom shenagul akal, even if it's a place where they're lenient on this issue, yesh lekos b'yadav, you should protest, right? So if it's machal ben drusai, no, that's not okay according to this lenient opinion, and you should protest those who try to use this kula and extend it further than fully cooked, even to something that's half cooked. Okay, fine. I'll leave you to figure out when to protest and when not to protest. I'm not so sure this is one we need to get worked up about. Okay, third line here, sif ches. We'll do a little bit. This is a very lengthy sif. Takes us all the way to the end of the simon. So we're not going to do the whole thing. We'll do just a little bit at the beginning, and then we'll stop. אף על פי שמותר להשאס קדרה על גבי קירה שיש בה גחלים על פי הדרכים שנסברו בסימן ר' נ' ג'. Even though it's permissible to do shahiyah in a pot on with a put your pot on top of a kira that has coals underneath it in the ways that we have examined and explained at length in Reish and Gimel, as we did some months ago. So you could do shahiyah. So let's say you have, remember the kira, you remember the pictures, right? A kira was an oven, small oven. The bottom, there was a place for the coals. On top, there were two holes, and you could put pots on top of the two holes, and it would obviously heat up from underneath. If, let's say I do that, I put a pot right on top of the hole where on top of the kira, and so the heat is rising up. It's an oven, it's, their ancient oven, one of the ancient ovens that they had. So now I put on top of that, I put bigodim, I put clothing. I take my my robe and I put my robe all I cover the pot on all three sides with my robe, with my clothing. We know clothing doesn't produce heat. It's ridiculous. Clothing doesn't produce heat.
But it's not covered all throughout, so it's not mana.
Correct. So we have here, it's
not the bottom.
It's flush against the top of the kira with the hole here with the heat rising up onto it. And now on all three sides, I cover it with bigodim.
But it's not mana.
Well, so take a look here. But it's not hatmana in the sense that there's one item covering it on all four sides, but now it is kind of sandwiched on all four sides. Okay, right? Three sides by clothing, one side it's sitting right on top of this oven. So even though the clothing themselves don't add heat, so you'll say, oh, well, the heat source is not all around, right? When you put it inside a pile of olive scraps, the heat source is all around. You put it in a pile of hot ashes, the source heats, the heat is all around it. And because of the flame that is underneath the pot, right? Mosif hevel, it is considered Mosif hevel v'aser. This is called hatmana. This is why I told you, if you have a reheating food on Shabbos day on a warming tray, and you have a heat source underneath, and then you place a blanket over top of it on all three sides, that's really hatmana according to this definition. So if you want to put a blanket on top and it's open on the sides, no problem. You just have to make sure it's open somewhere.
But I'm confused now because so if you start before Shabbat, you have fire with coals, for example, and you put the pot, you don't cover it. Can you go into Shabbat with this? Isn't that like
If it's not covered.
Yeah, but isn't that like zera because people can play with the
So if something as the Reish and Gimel talks about, if it's fully cooked, or for Ashkenazim partially cooked, like a half cooked, and it's on top of a heat source, no problem. Even if it's not on a heat source, right? So they're not in that situation. The rabbis were not worried because I don't have so much incentive to do that because it's cooked. The only reason I want to play with the coals is to increase the heat to it and intensify the fire. But if my food is fully cooked, what do I care? I don't care at that point. That's really underlies the heter, the permission to do that. So here, though, even though, as he's saying, even though it is mutter to do what I just described to you, if you do it in a fashion that is hatmana, where I cover same thing. All I did now is add a blanket. I added my clothing on top of this. Now I've made it, and I've turned this into a prohibited situation because that is considered hatmana. Okay. And by the way, just to clarify, take a look at the next sentence. So mihu kol shehu be'inyan she'ein habagadim nogein ba'kedera. If the clothing is not touching the pot, not touching. Even though there is fire underneath it. So let's say you create a situation. Imagine here that the table here is the oven, pot right on top of it, and I create a tent. Not it's touching, but I create a situation where I kind of, I don't know how you do it, but you you create a situation where, maybe I have, a thing on each side here, and then I put something on top, but it's open. But it does retain the heat more effectively because there is something that is, on top, but it's just not flush. So that, he says, is okay. Kevin she'eino osa derech hatmana. It's not hatmana. Shari, it's permissible.
So that's basically a warming drawer.
A warming drawer, correct? It has avir. It's not like it's on all sides. A warming drawer, you put it in, and there's a cavity there. Hatmana is touching, literally touching on all sides. Yeah. No, if you had thought your warming drawer is a problem, warming drawer is permissible on Shabbos, no problem. I just need to just cover the knob, the dial, whatever.
Electronic, there's nothing to cover. You just,
Oh, it's just on. Oh, it's one setting.
well, once you set it, yeah, that's it.
Right. Okay, good. So even easier. So okay, so that is what he says here. Let's read the Mishnah Berurah now. Lamed Zayin, Keder al Gabe Kira. So let's say you have a pot on top of the Kira, this oven with the two holes. The Hainu Shama Amida al Gabe Kira Milamala al Pi Avein Shule Hakadera Nogin Bachichalim. You place this Kira on top of, the pot on top of the Kira, on Milamala al Pi, above the opening. And of course, but very important, the bottom of the pot is not touching the gechalim. It's not touching the coals, shalamata that are underneath. They're in the compartment at the bottom. He says, let's say you put it in one of our heating situations, which is imagine it being on a tripod almost here, I think is what he's describing, a kisei shel barzel. That's in betoch kiros shalom, in our kiras. It will be similar where it's not touching at the bottom. The gam tiyeh akader mevushal kol tzorch. And again, in this situation at the beginning here, it's fully cooked. The fi das mechaber, according to the mechaber's opinion. Again, according to the Ramah's opinion, you could have it as partially kamachal and drusai, which is partially cooked. Machlokas Rambam and Rashi, whether it's a third or half cooked. Okay, Lamed Ches, Mechamas Eish Shetachtehem, because of the fires underneath it, we do consider it Mosif Hevel, and it's not allowed. And even if you threw ashes,
No, Efer is dirt.
that would be with an ayin, I think. Here it's the I think here, am I wrong about that? Afer with an aleph?
Efer is
Afar ve'efer. It's like
it's an olive.
yeah,
Efer.
maybe not ashes. Man.
No, yeah, that's ashes. I guess.
Ashes. Okay, that's what I thought. The father afer al gabe gechal. Let's say you put ashes on top of the coal. We talked about that's a way if you're trying to put out the coals. Right? You're trying to cool them down. It's not putting them out completely, but it's a way of certainly signaling you shouldn't stoke the coals. We talked about that. That was ketuma, right? Putting the ashes on the coals as a sign of not playing with the coal. That was one of the ways you could prepare for shehiyah and get around the whole cooking requirement. It could be a quarter cooked. And if you do grufo or ketuma, you either rake the coals out to the side, you cover the coals with ashes, that was a sign that you were not going to play with it, and therefore it was permissible. So even if you did that here, you call makom mosif hevel. At the end of the day, it's mosif hevel, and that's a davar mosif hevel. Yes, by shehiyah this would have been allowed, but this is hatmana now. So hatmana has its own laws
Because you
and
put a cover on.
Yeah. If I just uncover it on one side, something. That way you could put your begodim around it on two sides. If it's open on one side, that's not called hatmana and it would be permissible. Lamed tes kol shehu v'chulei. This is talking about that if there's it's not touching. It says here dahainu ke'ein shetzier hamachaber b'samach, as the mechaber describes in his description, right? What's happening there? There's a fire there. It's not touching, etc. That's okay. He's just saying it's kol shehu be'inyan she'ein habegadim mogin. Okay, there. Okay, That's all. He's just describing it. I'm not even sure what he's. He could be referring to something that takes place later in the simon. I'm not sure. Okay, let's do one more line and we'll stop. Hilchach back in the Shulchan Aruch. Hilchach hecha shemamin keder al gabe kira o kofach sheyesh ba gechalim bahem gechalim ve'ein shulei hakeder nogim ba gechalim shiui mikrei umuter al pi hadrachim shenisbar b'siman reish nakim. Says therefore, in a situation where you place it on, the pot on top of the kira, the opening, or on top of the opening of the kofach. The kofach was a miniature version of a kira. It was basically one hole at the top, if I'm not mistaken. I get that right from the pictures, Steve? The kira was two, kofach was one. The tanur of the gemara was had a wide bottom and a very narrow top with one opening at the top in order to intensely heat up the pot. But this is talking about the kira and the kofach. So if, let's say, I put a pot on top of the opening of a kira or a kofach, which has coals underneath, but the bottom of the pot, the shulei hakadera, is not touching the gechalim, it's not touching the coals. Shihui mikri, that's just called shihiyah. Umuter al pi hadrachim shenisbaru b'siman reish and gimel, and that you are allowed to do. He's re-emphasizing it here, as we talked about in reish and gimel. The biggest difference is just covering it on all sides. If you do that, it's no longer called shihiyah, it's called hatmana, and there are different rules you have to play by. It's not that, it's shihiyah, and then there you go by play by the rules that we talked about in Reish and Gimel. Let's take a look at Mem and then Mem Aleph and the Mishnah Berurah. Mem Hilchach Hecha v'chulei. Ata chaza lefarish b'kitzur mashakasa v'tchilas hasif. He's now just going back for a moment to say what he talked about at the beginning of the sif, because this is a little bit of repetition of what we talked about. Afal pisha mutar lahashos. Remember, he said afal, even though it's okay to do b'shihiyah, mashakasa v'vasof. And now what he's writing at the end, v'inyan she'ein habegadim nogi mutar. He's just he's just clarifying. If there are no begadim on all sides, it is permissible. You could do it as we talked about in Reish and Gimel.
Touching the
kedera, yeah. Mem Aleph, ve'ein shulei hakadera v'chulei, and the bottom of the kedera is not touching the actual coals. Amechaber ozil ishitaso b'sim Reish and Gimel sef sof sif Aleph. The mechaber here is following his position in Reish Nun Gimel, that if it's, I think that he's trying to say, there he said if it's touching the coals, that's a big problem. Then he's not happy with that kind of shihiyah. Move the coals, touch the. It's not. He doesn't like that it's touching directly the heat source, literally sitting on top of the coals.
Because when you move it, you're gonna move.
Right. He has problems with that. Exactly. But about the Ramah over there, when we talked about that issue, he said, he says, no problem. That's fine. I have no problem with it touching the coals itself. He says, it's not hatmana. Yay, it's very hot, it's intense, and the bottom is touching.
But touching the coals themselves, you cannot fire. You're not supposed to not fire.
Yeah, and he says, not hatmana. So meaning that Shulchan Aruch treated it like hatmana if it was like touching the coals. Like he had more strict rules, but the Ramah was not so strict about that. And we don't need to be strict about that. If it's touching a heat source, this is very practical, by the way. If it's touching a heat source, it's on your warming tray, which is the heat source itself. So okay, that's okay. The kedera is open on top. It's not covered on all sides. It is totally fine. Totally fine. Nothing to worry about. Okay. Let's see what we got here. You know what? Let's pause here. It's 8:21. It's a long day ahead of us. So we'll pause here. We're up to Mem Beis in the Mishnah Berurah. We're closing in. There's some lengthy comments between now and the end from the Mishnah Berurah. So it might take a few more sessions, a few more shiurim. But we are closing in on the end of our topic of Hatmana. And after that, we'll have a very small topic as an outgrowth of Hatmana, about putting something that's cold on top of a hot pot on Erev Shabbos. Is that like Hatmana and Davar Hamosif Hevel?
But the concept of playing with actual coals running fire, with touching them or moving them around, isn't that you're causing.
So the Rama would say it's when you take it, so the Rama would say when you take it off. Okay, who cares? Because it's a psikresha, the lo nichalei. Even if it's true that it's gonna happen. I didn't benefit from it because unless there's other food left, or I'm gonna, because now the fire is a little more intense. I don't have any food on it anymore. And so it's not helping me. And you might even claim it's that it is.
The concept of lo tavo osh b'chavod, kol ma shotechem b'yom Shabbat, isn't that an issue when you move them around?
So by every malacha, it's a question, if you have something that says davar she'eno miskabe, let's say that it's not a guarantee that when I take it off, the coals will
Or you have
will
no
move.
intention.
And if I don't do it with the kavana for that, so it's a davar she'eno miskabe, it's actually mutter. I'm allowed to do that. If I know it's going to happen, that's the psik resha case, right? You cut the head of a chicken off, so you give it to your child as a toy. You know that the chicken is going to die. That's what happens when you cut heads off the chicken. It's permissible, so long. So it's not allowed because you know what's going to happen. But Tosfos has a category that if it's a psik resha, the lo nichalei. Let's say I know it will happen, but I don't care. I don't benefit from it. Then it's permissible. Then I'm allowed to do that, according to Tosfos of psik resha lo nichalei on the Rabbanan, because it's the Rabbanan. It could be that the Aruch has an opinion that it's the Tosfos quote that even on a Doraisa, it would appear when we get there. I'll talk about this much more length. That the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Aruch that even by a Doraisa it's allowed. That the side thing that happened that I knew was going to happen with a Doraisa. We try not to rely on that. You ask the Shaila outright, we'll try to only if it's a Rabbanan, we'll allow it. But for example, I remember getting questions. I'll turn this